Cool. It's great to have you guys on the show. Oh, I guess we can call it a show, or the Telos 1 year anniversary live streams. So what are your thoughts on the last year? It's been incredibly exciting.
It really has, hasn't it? I mean, for all of us, and for a lot of us, it's usually been more of like a year and a half because we did a lot of building, and now we've been launched for a year. Wow, I was just thinking the other day how much work was going into like the whole launch, but really that last period of time when we were just like, we had remember the checklist? We had like all these things like, come on, we got to get another green thing. And we were like around last week, we were meeting every week or every day and, trying to figure out when we were actually going to go. And it was a lot of work. And, but I never really stopped. I think what happened just is that there's more work than ever, but more people than ever before doing it now, that's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. There's just so much momentum now, like the worker proposal system, or Telos Works as we're calling it now, is just full of life now. There's just like, I don't know, there must be like 20 proposals happening at any given time.
And they're cool crazy things, right? Like China marketing, India marketing, like all kinds of different regions, all kinds of different teams. It's exciting. Yeah, it's really exciting.
Definitely.
By the way, this is, for not everybody knows, Stephanie doesn't show up on camera quite as often as I do, but this is Stephanie Sunshine, the genius inventor behind dStore. So
yeah, hey Stephanie.
Hello.
So that's a really good segue, I think, into dStore, which is obviously what we're here for. And Douglas, obviously you're the white paper author as well, and highly involved in dStore. And a bunch of other different technologies like sentiment tokens and everything. So you guys are really a key team in the decentralized Telos ecosystem with all the innovations you're bringing. But anyway, onto dStore. Like, how did you guys get this idea? I guess it's been out there. There's other companies like Storage, trying to tackle this problem. But what specifically made you guys want to tackle this problem? Starting with Stephanie, or yeah.
Well, I'll give you this sort of the initial background, and then Stephanie can kind of talk to
that works.
The points of genius about how we actually got beyond like some really bad sticking points. So about 13, 14 months ago, we were able to, before the launch, we knew that Telos governance always needed some kind of IPFS system, right? Some kind of decentralized storage. So that things like the Telos Works proposal sheets and all these things could exist somewhere, so that afterwards you could provably say, you said you're going to do this, but you didn't do this, so give us back money. Or just people can say, hey, we said we would do this, but we actually did all of this, so fund us again, or whatever. We just needed that to be provable. So we and also for arbitration, for a lot of things, we needed that to be provable. So we built a IPFS system that was better than your average IPFS system. And we, with the plan that we were always going to roll out this thing we were calling Telos IPFS, and it was going to be this super awesome IPFS thing that that we thought we could do on IPFS. But it turns out, and we worked on it for quite a while, but it turns out there were a lot of problems with IPFS. And gosh, was it maybe like about 9 months ago, Stephanie and Peter and Craig and Ed and I like kind of all got together and said, hey, let's be realistic here. These guys on Filecoin are killing it. They figured it out. So, we have this list of things we need to figure out, and they've like figured out half of them, and looks like they're going to do great. Why don't we just engage with them, make sure there's a bridge between Telos and Filecoin, and that's the way forward, right? We'll connect these decentralized projects. No reason to reinvent the wheel at all. That's not what we wanted to do. So there's an article out there on the Telos Core Devs Medium about that, and it talks about that. What happened in the meantime, though, is so we were operating on that way. In that way, we were using a lot of the technology that has become dStore for other things, because dStore actually it does more than just decentralized storage. And the way to do decentralized storage, the way that Stephanie ultimately cracked the decentralized storage problem, had to do more with routing and load balancing and things like that. Interestingly, so we kept working on that, and at the same time, we realized that IPFS and Filecoin and those things, for all the early advantage they had and all the, as much as we admired those programs and actually thought that they were the way to go, they just they slowed down it seemed to me that they were not going on the pace that we needed them to go to be ready for this. And that coincided with some advances that Stephanie made on some of these other things. And we kept kind of checking back and forth, and she'd say, hey, this is kind of cool. We're doing this. And then I have a joke. It takes Stephanie telling me what these things are 3 times before I get them. And so by the 3rd time we talked about that specific point, I was like, why don't we just keep going with that? So she did, and it just kept going and going and going. And one of the reasons we haven't actually talked more about it is because until very recently, we weren't actually 100% certain that it was going to work, because there's a lot to unpack. What was so that's kind of the background about how long we've been working on this, but maybe can you talk about kind of what some of the big kind of breakthroughs and maybe you could talk about what the sticking points were about IPFS first, to be a little more context.
Sure. So IPFS in general is a great technology, but it's missing a couple global scale features or enterprise features or things that we need to be comfortable with what's going on. And a lot of these things were not actually built into vanilla IPFS, and we started to look at it and evaluate IPFS to see if it could be used for doing what we needed and to meet the criteria that we needed to be comfortable with the data being secure enough and accessible enough and fault tolerant enough. In the grand scheme of the world, nothing is 100% online 100% of the time, and we need to account for that, and we need to make sure that we can run without service interruption while that's happening. And that's not something that IPFS really accounted for. And it wasn't something that was really baked into anything at the time. So we started to look into it and started to evaluate it, started to come up with a system that allowed us to make IPFS meet and be acceptable and have the comfortableness we needed with the data being able to live through a fault tolerant situation or a time of split brain or outage. And IPFS had a lot of the building blocks that made it useful for doing this. Really well structured in the internal level to be able to actually deal and live and thrive in a split brain situation or a situation where you're not always going to be connected. So it made a really good tool to use as the underpinning for a more complete suite. And it was the development of that complete suite and trying to roll out a complete suite that was based off IPFS that did lead to dStore. And after looking and evaluating how to do interconnectivity and how to make it so we can safely tell other nodes or ask other nodes, what to save and what not to save, proved kind of tricky because it hadn't been really done at first by any other technology to this level or in this style. And over the last year, we've been researching and evaluating and overcoming those. And thankfully, a year later, after a lot of patience and time and communication, we have created something we think will actually work for allowing distributed storage to work on a global scale using IPFS's technology to take it to the masses. And we think that this is going to be these pieces together are what was needed to make IPFS usable on a grand scale.
Yeah. I mean, we can dig in. I'm sure there'll be questions later, and we can dig down to almost any level. There's some really exciting stuff too, so I hope we get to.
I'd love to take it back for a second and just in your opinion, what are the key problems that, decentralized storage, IPFS, dStore, what are the key problems in the world that we can solve with this?
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I think freedom, number one, especially with dStore, with our belief that we can, that this will be probably the technology that's most challenging for repressive governments to block. And as more and more, I mean, I worry about, I'm not planning to move, and yet I worry about living under a repressive internet government in the near future, right? So, so I think this is something that more and more countries are going to deal with. It's a greater and greater push from the rights of the individual to the rights of the state and the corporate state. And I think that having a form of communication that individuals can't be locked out of is massively important for really everything around the decentralized dream that blockchain, is a key part of, right? So I think that is incredibly important, and to some people in the world, like that's their current status. So they have no access to some of these things, right? It's some future state for us we worry about, but right now there are a lot of people who can't, just because of the country they live in, can't access information from other individuals, right? I think that's pretty big. I think in terms of every decentralized technology, right? Like let's look at supply chain, right? Let's say we want to do, because we've done on Telos, we've done some really good proof of concepts of supply chain. There's actually a live supply chain app for a special Appellation Control A cider in Spain, and that's really cool, right? So these things are really running now. If you're going to say, hey, these are organic apples, great. I want to see the document for the organic certification for every one of those farms. I want to see bills of lading. I want to see all these things. And if they're not there, then I'm not necessarily trusting, then it's not a trustless system, right?
Yeah,
so
that's key.
Every one of those things needs some kind of document, right? That's huge. Anything dealing with media, right? Sound, whether it's SoundCloud or Emanate or any of these types of apps, right? They all need to you're not going to manage music unless you are managing audio files. Same with video, same with everything, same with any kind of large data sets, right? Which they need to go somewhere. And if we're truly going to believe in this decentralized dream, then that somewhere shouldn't be AWS.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. So that's a key point you touched on. Like if we used blockchain with a centralized storage mechanism, say your own servers, that's great. You can prove that the data is what it should be at a specific date. You can prove who made it. But at any point, the person or people or company, they can turn it off at any moment because they're incentivized to do, or they go bankrupt. So by having it decentralized, it'll go on forever. Assuming the incentive system is in place, which it can be, we've proven that.
And that's an important part, and that's what
exactly
we designed that. But yeah, I mean, you think about kind of go back. There used to be this game called CryptoKitties. And I use game very loosely. There was this thing called CryptoKitties that was supposed to be a game, and people were excited on Ethereum that they could, own these CryptoKitties, and that's great. And they did. And there was a registry on Ethereum that was decentralized, and no one could change who owned what without the owner's permission, right? But most people, when they thought of a CryptoKitty, they thought of the illustration of a CryptoKitty and almost nothing else. Those lived on, Dapper's servers, right? So if those went down, and when those went down, you couldn't access it. So the thing that 99% of people think of as a CryptoKitty was inaccessible. Certainly the registry of who owned what, was still there on Ethereum, and you could trade them and everything, but nobody could look at them, right? This is the disconnect between what we're trying to tell people, what the what the dream, what the, this decentralized dream is. And then just a practical thing, like, if you're basically selling people a picture, they better be able to see the picture whenever they want to. So that's a big part of it. That's one of the things that we thought a lot about as we were building dRealms, which is a decentralized gaming universe that's going to be on top of dStore. I mean, we started out trying to build Draco's Keep. We realized we needed to build a decentralized market for that to work. So we built dRealms, and then we realized we absolutely had to get decentralized storage working and not wait for anybody else. So we built dStore. So we actually built successively larger technology, more important technologies, so that we could put out our Dragon game.
This is how some of the best innovations happen, right? You want to do a simple thing, and then on the way you have all these hurdles.
Like, I find it funny, but
it's yeah. I mean, some of the best things have come out of space launches and going to the moon, and all the problems that they had to solve on the way turned into consumer products. I think the pen.
Tang.
Yeah, exactly. It's
the right upside down pen.
Wow. So what are some of the use cases that you guys are particularly excited about?
How about you?
What products?
There's a couple. There's a couple I'm really excited about. I'm not sure how much can I actually talk about the technology we have coming.
Start small.
Okay.
Nobody knows anything, so start small, and we'll work out from there.
So I see dStore. dStore in essence is decentralized global storage, and it's something that can be easily verified due to the fact that we use hashes to look everything up. So it allows us to do a lot of really cool things there. But one of the things that we have been discussing a lot is how to take current wallets and expand them into something more useful and something more personal, something that acts more like a personal portal into your world rather than just something that lets you see your totals and your transactions. And when we started looking at, what could we put there and the various things that we could, find useful, it turns out that there's a lot of things we could do. And there's a lot of things that already exist in the world that communities use, people want, there is a demand for, but are tired of the corporate control and the trade-off that we are now a commodity. We are their product, and people don't like that. So we've come up with various technologies to pair with this. But one of the prime examples is something like what do we not debadge? Debadge. So think of a like a bridal registry or an event registry where you go to an event and you could scan a QR code that would let you leave a note, or your own personal icon to a smart contract that would have all of the information for the event, that would have its own badge, like a hat pin for the event, that would allow you to have a public, almost like MySpace or GeoCities or even possibly Facebook display where you can actually make your own web page that displayed all of the different things that you've been up to, sort of like a military lapel, where all of the different campaigns you've been in, all the different badges you would get. So you could actually show where the things you've been to and go and click and go. For instance, you were at a major Halloween party or something years ago, and your friends were talking about it and wanted to go see all the details about it and go, well, who else was there? And be able to go click on this registry and be able to go see, oh, well, yeah, they were there and we had this fun time and there were all these pictures that were linked to it. And we could actually do picture storage and actually have control where we actually own the rights to our pictures still, and the ability to do, have all of those controls and be able to do, true access control lists where we're in control of all of it and And we don't have to worry about a corporation trying to steal our imagery or contort our words or use it for any of the nefarious reasons they use it for in their propaganda campaigns today.
Yeah, I mean, think about this is not the first one that comes to mind for me at all. So I'm glad we asked you first. But yeah, so think about that. You can go to events, and anyone can put on an event, right? And this is actually sort of a little bit of a marriage of sentiment tokens and dStore, right? So you could have each event could have its own badge. These could show up in your. We're starting to call wallets personas because they do so much more than a wallet. Then they're really more like your personal access and into the whole world that's going to be decentralized. So let's say you're using a persona, and it's got your regular wallet stuff, but it also has a panel. You dock in the panel for your badges, and you've got like all these badges for all these parties you went to. You can only get those by actually showing up. In fact, you might have to like bring your phone and scan your persona there to prove that you're there. But once you have that, all the pictures you take can be tagged with that. They can live on dStore. You can do videos. You can do all these things that'll be on dStore, and only people with that persona. With that badge on their persona can actually go and access them. I mean, things like that. I think that's like really cool. That's a use that there's no direct, it uses enough little pieces of blockchain and dStore technology that there's not really, a clear analog in the existing world. I think,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's going to be cool. Now, I think people are going to build. I think someone's going to build the Dropbox on. I think that that's awesome. Like that's new. I'm excited for that. I'm going to do that at every rave I go to from now on. But I also think that people are going to be excited about sort of a decentralized version of stuff that they already know, right? So like a decentralized dStore Dropbox, where number one, there's no Dropbox guys showing up in videos and you have to be embarrassed that you're, on basketball courts. You have to be embarrassed that you use Dropbox. And they also don't have to pull out a lot of money, right? So we can have it be less expensive, be very convenient, along with the idea of the persona. There's no reason that a lot of these things couldn't be put right interface right into your Telos persona wallet, right? So like, for example, this is why we're saying it's not a wallet anymore. It's ridiculous. It's more of your like kind of passport of the world, because it controls your keys and your access and things like that. And you use those things to sign into different things like way better than passwords, right? So let's say then you have, I don't care as much about the badges, or maybe I do. Maybe I have a panel for my badges, but I also have a panel for my Dropbox, my decentralized, file storage, right? And I could just upload things directly from my Telos persona, right? And store it there and pay for it in Telos control who accesses it, right? That's a very common thing. People understand that model a lot. I mean, everyone uses it, right? I think that's something that we'll also see. So from the new and exciting to the old and boring, but gosh, everybody uses it. Something for everyone.
No, definitely. I mean, the kinds of use cases you guys are talking about, like, pretty much covers off every big social media platform in the world, like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. They all have.
It's just storage, right? So really, deep down, it's boring. So we showed you a couple of weeks ago a live demo of it, right? And you saw it, and everyone was really nice and like, wow, that's cool. But the reality is, when you show this to people, they go,
it just works.
Yeah, it's yep, that's a document. Like I pull documents off the internet all the time, and oh wow, that's just good. Yeah, you're streaming video just like YouTube, and like no, but it's because it's decentralized. This is So we almost have to like do this side by side thing with AWS, like traditional cloud, old school IPFS, dStore, so that you can see like what the it's like these pop up right away, and this thing is like just circling, waiting.
Yeah. I mean, it's really the combination of dStore and the Telos blockchain and the sort of products that enables, and the opportunities that enables for the user, like things like, say, a decentralized Facebook, where, you know, obviously you have your privacy, you unlock it to others so they can see your wall, but not everyone can see your wall. But then because no one actually has full control of the data, you can actually sell that data to someone if you want to, and you can sell it anonymously. You know, that's a huge tangible monetary incentive that is suddenly there that couldn't be in, you know, the centralized version, you know, where it is a Facebook. They have full control over, you know, the servers of the data. They have access to everyone's information, basically. Like, huge financial opportunities for everyone, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like, so blockchain, like, so dStore, it's really interesting. You know, we're basically a blockchain, you know, think tank company here at GoodBlock. And we come up with stuff and then we build it, and then we get super excited about the stuff we were able to build, like, you know, like our involvement in Telos and things like that. But, you know, dStore is not blockchain. It's a very different technology, but it's a highly complementary technology, right? So so they go hand in hand. I actually feel like decentralized storage is the technology that blockchain has been waiting for to take the shackles off and let it be what it wants to be. And even as a developer, you think about all these things. It's like, yeah, but there's no decentralized. You know, it's like this is a world computer with no hard drive. And so Stephanie invented the working hard drive. Other people invented the hard drive, but Stephanie invented the working one. So
Fault tolerant one.
Yeah, fault tolerant, high speed. Yeah, yeah. So that's cool. Well, let's get some. We can do a little more a few more technical questions.
Yeah, I'm less technical, so should we get people to jump on the call now, or I'll just run through a few more technical questions.
Yeah, why don't you ask a few more, and then people, if you're on, you guys should be thinking up good questions while Stephanie's here.
Yeah, definitely. Get ready to ask some questions. So, because I'm not technical, let me try and think of something. So we've covered some of the technical challenges. Do you want to deep dive on those a little bit more, or do you think we've covered that off?
Maybe we should talk. You want to talk about why one big advantage of dStore over IPFS is data permanence, right? The fact that on IPFS, you occasionally just lose files, right? And that's not going to happen on dStore for really good reasons. You want to talk about that a little, the 101 level for people?
Sure. So IPFS, when we first originally started looking at it, it was a really cool technology. It was a technology I feel that was built by developers trying to create something better that unfortunately hadn't had real world system administration experience. I feel like within the last 20 years, most real world system administration, diehard Unix, big metal type system administrators have all but disappeared. And a lot of the skill set that goes with it, and a lot of the history and the learning curves and the pains that go with going through those trials and tribulations went with it as well. And I think a lot of it has been ignored in the modern cloud world as well, and especially in the microservice and virtual machine world.
Everything old is new again, right?
In a lot of ways, yes. And a lot of ways, we create really cool technologies, but we need to figure out what the next problem is. And IPFS solved a lot of really cool things with hashes and split brain, and a lot of really high level problems when it comes to global scale type stuff. And that was really cool. But one of the big downsides to IPFS in the vanilla form is that there's no way to easily replicate. When you ask for a file, and if you don't have it, but it is within the swarm that you're connected to, you can request it and it will cache it locally. And if the original one disappears and somebody makes a request, you can fulfill that request, and the file is allowed to propagate throughout the swarm. However, if the initial seed disappears before anybody is ever able to copy or make a request of that file, then there's no way to actually get a hold of it because there's nothing there. And this was a big, got you about IPFS that made it hard to say, okay, well, if we have a swarm where people are constantly coming and going, how do we make sure everything's valid without putting everything everywhere? Because putting everything everywhere at all times is just not scalable. And when we start talking about going past terabytes of data and getting into petabytes of data and beyond, there's no single hard drive that's ever going to keep that. There's no single place that really should ever have to maintain that data, because that creates a single point of failure that can be easily removed. And then what? We're back to the AWS concern and problem. So we needed to do something that allowed to create a level of confidence that we could be okay with. And I talk in words specifically that are not absolute, because it's really hard to talk about absolutes in this situation, because nothing is absolute in this situation. This is not RAID. This is not a replacement for Ceph. This is not something that is going to replace SANS. This is not something that is going to replace enterprise workgroup storage. That's not what this was designed to do. There are cool technologies and hardware and things out there to do that way better than anything we could ever come up with. However, there is not very much of anything when it comes to trying to do something at a global scale. When we're talking about something at a community level, where we talk about people as an individual and not as companies and enterprises as entities. So we needed to make something that accounted for that. And instead of saying what is something that we think is the best, we needed to come up with something that was good enough compared to what we were able to work with. And when we start looking at it from those terms, we started going, okay, well, if we can figure out how many peers are available in our swarm, and if we could come up with some way to ask them to pull that data locally and cache that without having to be requested first, well, it wouldn't necessarily be RAID, and it wouldn't necessarily be a perfect form of Ceph, but it would definitely contribute severely to the health of a file within a IPFS swarm. When we started looking at that, we started going, okay, well, there's obviously got to be some kind of formula, because everybody caching it all at once is not going to work, is not going to scale, and too little is going to make everything not fault tolerant. Yeah. We needed to come up with some kind of formula, and that was what we actually came up with a year ago. That actually led to the initial TIPFS scripts that actually even started us in this world to be able to say, yes, it is a possibility to actually make IPFS work in a situation that we can actually guarantee some kind of consistency with the data availability. And that was something that IPFS's public swarm can't even do.
Wow. So the current vanilla form of IPFS, can files go completely missing and inaccessible? Are they inaccessible forever, or are they inaccessible temporarily?
It really depends. It comes down to when IPFS literally asks, can I find this file hash? Does somebody have it? If somebody does not have it at that moment, it will come back and say, sorry, we don't have it. If somebody has it at a later time and it is requested, then it will be fulfilled at that time. This is the split brain situation that I was talking about earlier, where servers can come and go and actually come and go at their own will, and not necessarily have a full copy of everything at all times, and actually not even be connected and actually completely in synchronicity with the rest of the swarm at all times. And this was one of the really cool features of IPFS that makes it unique and makes it actually more usable, more applicable to the situation, the problem we're trying to solve, versus something like Ceph.
Yeah, and along those lines, and this kind of goes into access, right? So one of the things that Stephanie was touching on there is IPFS is made up currently basically a bunch of volunteer nodes, right? And people running stuff. And so if the computer that got the first version of a file goes offline, right? Then unless they decide to come, either because their internet's down or because this guy went, forget it, I'm done with IPFS, or their thing crashed or whatever, that's gone until they come back. Now, so once files get replicated into the system, then they're a little safer. But you know, you never know who those people are going to be and what if they're running them off their home system, if that's intermittently available or not. So there's because IPFS is sort of volunteerism, right? Largely. Now the coins like, you know, Siacoin and Storage and all these others, and Filecoin, I mean, there's a number of them. They seek to incentivize people to make that more permanent, right? And so, for example, Siacoin, what they do is you have to stake a bunch of Sia into your account as a deposit against lost files, right? So if I say, okay, I'm gonna store your guys' files, and I'm gonna put in, you know, 10,000 Sia coin or 1 million Sia to show that, you know, that I will lose if I lose your files. Well, there's some problems with that. For one thing, Sia coin has gone down a lot in price, so that deposit's not worth as much anymore, and that's, you know, and it could go up again tomorrow, but it could also go down again tomorrow. That leads to people being less incentivized to doing that, and it's not really it's an incentive. It's not really baked in. You know, nobody else in that group is like replicating that. So you're really kind of, now you're trusting a lot of different individuals, but it's not as good. And also, you don't necessarily know what their infrastructure is like how quickly they can serve those. So there's a few reasons why IPFS is slow. One of those is that, you know, you might be pulling off a file that's, like, you know, far from you, or occasionally off, or even when it's on, doesn't have the fastest internet access. The other reason is it has to find that. Sorry, was that limited seeds? And yeah, limited seeds, right? So those are problems, and that's how people try to incentivize that. We use a totally different model of incentivizing it. First of all, we thought that blockchain, having a second underlying blockchain to incentivize it, was not necessary and not even the best way to do it. And so instead, what we have is people get paid, the infrastructure providers get paid by how, you know, we count up how many files are served in, let's say, a month, right? And there's a back-end accounting using Elk stack, and that's tracking what everyone's paid, all the providers. And so the more basic, and they get a pro rata share of what the money that came in that month, right? So the more files you serve, the more you're going to get paid. And the way to serve more files is to be up higher in the stack of the more available nodes in whatever region, right? So that means that people incentivize to put, when there's not very many in a region, there's an incentive to put more in that region. And there's an incentive to have a more powerful, better infrastructure, because you're going to get more requests and therefore more pay. That's a totally different way to incentivize it than anyone else has used. And I think it's better because it does what the other ones that aren't really doing, which is paying, you know, giving away, providing a way for better managed nodes to get paid more, right? So that's important, right? So that means that you're going to have a bunch of you're only going to be pulling from the top third, right, of the better managed nodes. So people can bring on, you know, like people ask me, well, can anyone plug their computer in, you know, and their hard drive? And like, yes, you absolutely, you know, when we're out of beta, anyone could plug in and be part of this, and that's great. But unless you're providing like professional level infrastructure, you know, like a block producer, right? Then you're not going to get called to serve a lot of things because there's going to be these better, you know, these better servers available. That's a difference that we see from like proof of work mining, right? Where anyone can plug in and you do a little bit better if you've got a better infrastructure, but anyone can basically do it. But basically you're actually not doing a lot of computing, you're just hashing and then hopefully finding the solution. When we go to DPoS, to like a you know, EOS.io blockchain like Telos or EOS, we've said, hey, look, for this to advance into what we really need is a world computer, we can't actually just run this thing on a bunch of BeagleBone SBCs like Bitcoin is actually run on, right? You can, Bitcoin is actually basically run on a series of Raspberry Pis. You've got these very expensive machines, but they don't do anything having to do with what's being written to Bitcoin. This is true. I love Bitcoin. It's not a dig. It's just actually how it works, right? I'll grab one from one of my mini old ASICs. So, but DPoS and EOS.io says, no, let's use awesome professional enterprise quality computers in really great data centers. So they have high uptime, low latency, and really let's build this like as a computer that people could actually use as a worldwide computing system. That's what we did when we moved. That's what we did when we moved to DPoS and EOS.io and Telos and EOS and everything. That same transition is the transition we're trying to take IPS from a proletariat, everyone bring whatever computer from awesome to POS, to that you want to the system, because basically you're going to because you're not getting paid any better. That means you're all going to get down. Most of the computers are going to be down here. Now that we're paying better, we're moving this thing. Let's professionalize this. Let's bring in the great infrastructure that we have available in this world, and then that brings us up, and that brings the speed up. That brings everything up, the professionalism up. I think that's why we're going to be able to offer SLAs once we come out of beta, which I don't think no one could ever really do with IPFS.
So this is probably a really dumb question, but I'll ask it anyway. So say I'm using an app and I need to get access to my own photos. How is it decided which nodes actually end up serving me? And therefore, who gets the reward for serving me, basically, the files?
Oh, that's it's a great question.
And if this might be getting into
I can give you the light version, and you can feel free to always correct me if I'm wrong about something, but I'm going to try and keep this high level. So as your request comes in, you will be reflected to a node in the network, and that node you're being sent to that node, not knowing if it has it or not, because it is a highly accessible node in the mesh for you, where you are regionally and what their latencies are and things like that. That connects you to the mesh. If you are there, if the file is there, it'll be served to you. If the file is not there, it will be, you're in the mesh. The mesh, that server will ask the rest of the mesh, and if it has it, it will be sent to that server and forward replicated onto that server. So the process of more asks replicates more files throughout the system.
Okay.
I might have said too much.
We'll cut it out later.
I know I might have said too much for
covered a good part.
Our patent reasons.
Oh, yeah. I think the way that I hear your question is how are we figuring this out? How are we telling people where to go? And Douglas touched on a couple of things there, that we are using load reflection and using HTTP redirect calls to send people to other places without having to send through us.
I think we're getting to the area we probably should say much more.
All right, fine.
What I'm hearing though is that the more people request certain files, the faster they get in their region, basically.
That's true too. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
More files will be, the more files will be on more servers. We're trying not to create things where everything is on every server, but the really popular ones will be on more servers.
Okay.
This is a technology that's designed to retain, not to delete. So actually deleting is sometimes hard, right? So we tell the nodes to delete them, but some things that require that you send to delete will persist longer. And that's and I'm not sure how I got on this, but I'll finish it. That's because when you're creating a system, you're either creating something where the priority is when in doubt, retain it, or when in doubt, delete it. And it's much more important for us with dStore, when in doubt, retain it. it's related. That's related to your question, but I'm not going to. I can't really tell you kind of how that's related. But that's an interesting fact.
Definitely, definitely. So I imagine there's different classes of storage that are utilized in this system. Like if it is data that is rarely ever retrieved or just put there once and then hasn't been retrieved ever, does it go to some really slow storage, but it's still there?
No.
Okay.
No, the way that this works actually is that when you upload a file, you figure out how many things to ask to hold it, and everything past that, back to what you were asking about the health of it and how does this scale out, is that if a file is highly requested or is being requested highly for that moment, a file will be pulled to an edge, pulled to an outpost, and cached there locally as it's being used. And if a file hasn't been used in X amount of hours and it's not something that's actually been requested to retain past X amount of hours, the file will be deleted. So this allows us to automatically scale for extreme events right away. So if something goes viral and the whole world needs to see it right away, it'll cache it all everywhere almost instantly. But if in 12
funny,
hours,
the caching goes viral as well. It's like in synergy with the social element.
So and the more that it expands. So if, say for instance, it's something that's time zone related. So the first time zone already warmed up all the cache. So now that the next time zone comes online, it has all of those seeds to go. So the next whole tiering actually pushes to the edge even faster. So the idea that if something that is in higher demand, something that is that is being more requested or even being used regularly, will absolutely be cached more often at the edges, so they can be readily available, and things that are not being used will automatically be scaled back to the initial nodes that were requested to retain at past garbage collection.
Wow, it seems like really sophisticated, just like a really smart service. How will this compare with centralized services? How will this compare with something like Netflix use currently? I imagine I think they mirror, their content at different servers around the world. So then it's always fast wherever you're streaming from. Could this be utilized by a company like Netflix, and how will it compare to their current service?
Yeah, I think it absolutely can.
Yeah.
And so Netflix does what Netflix is one of the few companies that's actually saying, okay, we want to be in multiple regions. So wherever you're going, you have a fat pipe to us and quick access. Most things don't actually do that. They're in they should be in 2 regions, right? They're only in 1 region. And so everything's coming, and it's speed of light is fast, and things go pretty fast, and that's good enough for a lot of things. With video streaming, they specifically want to be super fast. They never want people to get the swirling ball, so they do that. But dStore actually, but most cloud service users do not do that to that extent. dStore essentially does that automatically. That's what we do, because we're in so many regions, right? So you can always get to what you're looking for once you get inside the mesh. And that's the same way that it provides some resiliency against government firewalls, right? Once you're in, and you can get in from a lot of places. Does that make sense?
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much my answer to this is, when people ask, can dStore be applied to this, is that are they using something like S3? Are they using something like Cloudflare? Are they using something to do some kind of CDN or some kind of storage that they need to get access from their application, whether it be for assets or data migration for user stuff? Anything along those lines is what dStore does, and it does it better than S3, and it does it better than a lot of these other major centralized stacks, just because of the limited region stuff. Yes, you can roll your own to make your own multiple region stuff, but then you have to maintain it. You have to pay somebody to watch that. There's a lot of things that companies just don't really think about when it comes into the overhead of actually trying to maintain a stack across multiple regions and be able to obtain all of this data and keep it in synchronization. And IPFS sidesteps so many of those issues by fixing the underlying technology problems rather than trying to shim what currently exists.
Yeah.
What she said.
Exactly. Yeah, you touched on some amazing points there. I mean, you're running a startup, and or any business, and the cost of having all your own sysadmins running all this equipment, keeping it in shape, is just like astronomical when you can decentralize it to some of the best people in the world, and it's done in a way that it's like a mesh that if someone fails at their job, then it doesn't really matter because there's so many it's like decentralizing to sysadmins all around the world basically.
Yeah.
And the various other people who are involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about something that we've kind of talking around that that I'd like to, you haven't asked, but let me, as if you would ask.
No, I was getting to that question. I wanted to ask about the IP version for, like, I know that all the addresses are getting taken up. Can we, is this compatible with IP version 6?
It actually is built on IPv6 natively, all internal IPv6 first. And we actually started trying to do this on IPv4 when we looked at this last year and looked at who was using IPv4 and who had access to IPv4 in a non-NATed situation versus who had access to IPv6. The solution presented itself to use a mesh network to basically remove the NAT problem that we were experiencing. That was a serious issue.
You'd actually, by the way, we would solve that, and I don't think we should talk too much.
Right.
But I think so. To your question, and that actually wasn't the question I was going to ask, but it's a great.
My
question.
bad.
No, that's a great question. So IPv, so as a sort of level setting for people, the internet, right? If you behind DNS, behind the domain name service, you're actually going to these addresses that are like 192.68.0.1, which is probably your home router, right? But all internet services are actually going to this IPv4 address with 256, number of addresses. Well, that's a finite number, and we basically have run out of those in a lot of regions of the world, right? And America's like, we kind of reserved a lot because we sort of invented the internet, and so we held on to a lot. So we're the last ones to run out. But the rest of the world is basically out of those, and they're only like there's no new ones. They're just basically recycling the old.
No, they're done with recycling.
Oh, they're done.
That was the announcement. They're done with recycling. There is no more blocks. They gave the last /22 away, and for people that don't know what that is, that's only 1,000 addresses, which is not much when you start thinking about an ISP having rows of machines and having definitely more than 1,000 machines on the floor.
Yeah. So IPv6 is just going to have 6 numbers, right? And
it's 8 octets.
It's 8 octets, right? That's right. So there's so it can have massive, so it can scale, and that's what you need. Like, especially if you're going to have a future where every one of the 1 trillion devices, IoT devices in the world have their own direct address, right? Then you could actually do that with this. So we're basically future-proofing it. When it came time to build this, Stephanie, she was like, let's do this right, so we don't have to redo it in 6 months or a year. So it's natively built on IPv6, but since a lot of people use IPv4, you can totally find IPv4 addresses and come into it from that way. But under the hood, it's all IPv6. So that is really important. What I was going to add, the thing I was going to suggest, though, is the topic that I was going to mention is, we're talking about how important it is, right, to have all these providers and everything like that. Well, and like you said, I mean, GoodBlock is a small company. We've developed this ourselves. How on earth can we have built? How can we actually have this worldwide global network of high-end infrastructure providers, right? That's actually a really hard piece to build. Well, fortunately, in building Telos, we are working with 60 very, very high infrastructure companies, right? If you're going to be like a Telos block producer, you have all the infrastructure, everything you need except for a bunch of drives, right? So this is actually a way that block producers can, I mean, anyone can do this, but we already have an awesome, real, true global network of block producers who have these great systems, right? And we want to give them a new way to make money off those just by adding drives and the connectivity to it. So one of the really amazing happy accidents of this thing, right, is that we are already working with a group that can provide this. Like if we were to start out from now and say, hey, we invented, Stephanie invented this thing and we're ready to go. Now let's start finding people around the world who can do this. It'd be much harder and take much longer than rolling out, all these, or, these relationships that we've been working with all these great companies for a year or a year and a half, right? On a really sort of like roll up the sleeves deep level, right? And we have great working relationships with, we're actually running a network with all the time. We know what they have. So it's much, and because it's extremely demanding on them, this is another thing, right? You can have Coin and stuff like that because all somebody has to do is install the wallet and click stuff and everything like that, right? And that's a great way to get a lot of people in and make a system that hasn't been really working yet. There's a reason for that. We're doing something harder. We're taking high-end computers, and it's not necessarily super easy. I mean, it will be easy because there's a whole, I don't know if it's Ansible or Docker that we're using to deploy it, but you need to have, to run a dStore, to be a dStore storage operator, people are going to have a high level of fluency with network operations. This is not something for you to just, plug in a USB hard drive and be offering, storage to people. This is higher end. So that's great because we already have this group. It's very important. dStore is actually kind of an amazing, okay, I'm going to, get a little bit weird here. It's amazing, I think, that Telos happened. It's absolutely amazing that we were able, at a time when there was a need and there was an opportunity in this fantastic EOCO software, but there was also a need to do something that was much more decentralized and done in the way that Telos was. That was amazing. I think that would be extremely hard to replicate ever again. It was a lot of things in the world are sort of like an accident of the right time at the right place with the right people and a lot of luck. And I think Telos was that. Interestingly, I think dStore was that too for mostly separate reasons, right? It's very interesting that Stephanie's background and expertise is quite rare. The situation we have at GoodBlock, with the ability to go in and look at new foundational technologies from a small company is quite rare. And then the connection we had to Telos itself with this good group, which is also quite rare, and it would be very daunting for us. I probably, if we had to invent the technology and then also onboard a whole, that'd be another year. It would be a year to onboard all those partners. Fortunately, that year already happened, and we have them. So it's actually it's kind of like a lot of really lucky things. And someday when we can really tell the story about how dStore came about, it goes deep. There's a lot of like really lucky, really, it's quite a story. There's a lot of really lucky coincidences. And so when people go, oh, well, do you think anyone else is going to come out with this? I'm like, no one's going to come out with this. I can't believe we came out with this. So there's a lot of really fortunate, happy accidents that lined up, both to create Telos and then sort of separately, but kind of part overlapping with the network to create dStore. So makes you think.
It does, doesn't it? I could ask questions all day, but I might let the audience actually ask a few questions. There were some really good
in
there's some really amazing questions here. And guys, if you want to join the call and ask your question live, we can do that. So just give me a yell and I'll add you. So I really like this question. Are you thinking about tools to prevent illegal content images, video that people might want to store? And this is from Kirsten from Bitcoin Quest, I think.
And that's really, so it's interesting. So VA from Crypto Suvi basically put his finger on it with his response. He says, according to which law? When I saw that come through, I was going to say exactly, I was going to say illegal to who, right? So illegal content. Let's say what illegal content? Well, in China, footage and accurate reporting of what's happening in Hong Kong is illegal. Do we want to block that? In North Korea, I think pretty much everything's illegal. Do we want to, so there's a lot of stuff that's illegal that's because a certain government doesn't want it around. And that's not the mission of this. Unfortunately, there's also hate speech and child pornography and all kinds of things that are horrible and that we don't support, wouldn't want to support. However, I personally believe that the mission of being able to make human-powered, storage and communications in this new internet that's not mandated to us by governments and by quasi-governmental corporations, mega corporations. I think it's important enough that we empower that we accept the risks, accept the collateral damage of having some content also be stored that nobody wants to store. There are other ways to address that as well, but we don't really intend to be, I don't think it's our place to be scrubbing through people's files. Many of that will be encrypted anyway. We simply couldn't. I don't think that's not the place to dStore. It's the place at dStore to do storage.
Yeah, nothing's anonymous on dStore.
What's that?
There's nothing's anonymous on dStore. Like you have to have a Telos account to put something on dStore. Do you want child pornography tied to your Telos wallet? Do you want Nazi propaganda tied to your stuff?
Well, people's Telos wallet could be, but people can be on Telos anonymously.
I understand that, but my point is that there are a little bit more layers to it that make it a little bit prohibitive. Yes, someone will always find a way around something to use something for something it wasn't intended for. That's the whole nature of hacking in general. Do we, are we police officers? No. Which country do we adhere to? It doesn't. No, it doesn't. We can't have that. We need, and security through obscurity or trying to hide something from the mainstream doesn't change the reality of what it is. We need proper education, not to sweep something underneath the rug. And I don't think it's really dStore's place to really, take that philosophical stance on what every individual thing is, but to try to, say that we're not aware of it. Well, we are aware of it, but we're more aware of things like the abuses of China towards Hong Kong, or the concentration camps that are happening over that are just starting to come out, or like some of the stuff that's happening even in some of the more heinous places in the world. Like dStore is built more to get data out there and to help people, get past censorship and get past, government oversight and government overstep. And nothing is a perfect tool.
And by the way, not to pick on China, I mean, that's happening in the United States as well to some extent. So let's not pretend that we're like the shining star that we would like to be. Let's get on, but so that's our approach. We're not there to serve governments. We're there to serve.
It's not our role to decide what data people should have.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
We can talk about that more. I mean, that's going to be an ongoing question.
It's a lot to unwrap, isn't it? I know Marlon wants to get in and ask a question. So
hey, Marlon, how's it going?
Hey guys, how are you?
Great.
Great. Okay, so I'll get straight to it because I got to head out in a second. But as you guys know, I believe I've shared a bit with you. Today we're storing terabytes and terabytes of call recordings. I believe we are upwards of 10 million individual files that are currently stored in S3 that we've accumulated over the past several years that we're planning on migrating over to dStore. So just a few quick questions that I'd like answered. The most important for our clients is perpetual storage, right? So we need these individual files to be accessible at all times. We're talking years into the future, right? The second is, are you developing sort of similar to how Telos has minimum requirements defined for node operators? Are dStore operators going to have something similar as well? And lastly, speed. So if you can address those three areas for me, I'd very much appreciate it.
Sure. So let's start with the first one, longevity. As long as a file has accountability ability to pay for its accounting, a file will always exist. And even when a file doesn't have, like, say for instance, you're delinquent on a bill, a file is not necessarily deleted. And even when something is unpinned, it's still not necessarily deleted. And so longevity is for us isn't so much of an issue. The bigger one for us was actually split brain. The other one is what happens when you lose a third of, lose Europe, or lose, your outbound connection to the world. That stuff can happen, and that stuff actually happens quite often, especially when you get into third world nations and other places that only have one internet connection coming into their country. And IPFS was actually, we built this to actually be mostly in a read-only state. So even if you do have a disconnect from its upstreams or disconnect from the storm, it can actually still fulfill responses and actually still fulfill requests. We've actually also taken this to another extreme, where even if you have a situation where if you have like a third world nation where you have only a local network for just your community and have like a satellite uplink, where you could actually have your own management node and actually have your own IPFS node and actually run your own IPFS swarm within your own NAT there, and actually have your own local thing that actually allowed you in and out of what all the whole rest of dStore is through that single link, or to be able to do a mesh through multiple links.
So the entire technology, a shorter version of this, is the entire technology is designed to retain files, right? Like I was talking about before, you have to, is this going to be something, it's going to be actually harder to, like, a problem would be if somehow you absolutely had to ensure that a file was deleted, right? That's harder. That's not, the system's not designed to do that. It's designed to retain files. So we do delete things, but even like Stephanie was saying, even when you tell the system to delete it, it's possible it can persist because it's so fixed on, we are as long as the system is up and running, with any nodes, it's retaining files. The second question was your second question. Oh, you got it?
Yeah. So your second question about the standard qualifications for node operators.
Right.
In the end, this thing is only going to be as good as the weakest link. And on top of this thing is only going to be as good as the hardware involved. And we were aware of that very early on. We looked at this and said, well, can we make this so everybody can use this? Or can we make this so people that, can make an investment can be a part of this, but make it so the cost of entry for that investment was not a serious burden.
In terms of a storage node provider, not in terms of an end user.
Right. So a storage node provider, for instance, they have to have a minimum amount of bandwidth available. They have to be able to have a load time that meets a certain requirement before they're even accessible. On top of that, they have to have a certain amount of storage, and based off the longevity, the length that they make that their server available to the service, promotes them within the system to fulfilling requests. And the whole name of the game is to, as a node operator, is you want to fulfill as many requests as you can, because you get paid for every one of those requests. And for that to happen, you need to make sure that you have the bandwidth and you have the system load, and that you have the storage to be able to maintain and be able to provide a quality of service that is acceptable to meet our minimum requirements. This in turn incentivizes people to go and do higher level and higher quality installs using higher bandwidth, using more storage, using better servers, using more servers. Because, like, in the end, we don't really care how many servers you have. We really care how many services, how many requests you fulfill. So with us, if you have a situation where your node is telling us that you're using X amount of bandwidth, and you've told us that you're only allocating us, 2/3 of that, then we know that we only have 1/3 available that we can play with trying to respect what you're allowing us to use. So we're not trying to be greedy and take everything that's available. What we're trying to do is go, okay, what are you allocating to us? How much of that resource is available for us to fulfill requests within users that are close enough to want to use that edge for filling requests?
So, and I would say that's a great answer, maybe a little shorter answer. Especially, so this is decentralized storage at full scale. Having requirements becomes more difficult. Certainly during our beta, our long beta, we have a phase 1, beta 1, 2, and 3. Certainly during that period, we'll absolutely have minimum requirements for storage node operators. Later on, I don't know whether we'll have that or not, but functionally we will, because only the higher end ones are actually going to be fulfilling requests and therefore being paid. So there is, unlike any other system, decentralized system that I know of, there is an incentive not just to provide uptime, but and amount of storage, but actually provide higher infrastructure storage.
Higher quality.
Higher quality. Yeah.
Because in the end, this comes down to response time. If it's not responsive, it's not usable.
Yeah, in a way, and so it's funny, in a way, this is storage, but actually, and you can talk about this a little bit more, but it's not really the hard drive space that people are renting. It's the network access that
yeah.
And it's a different way of thinking about it. And so the main thing that we need to do is provide excellent access for people, because storage is actually pretty cheap, and for a high end. Once you have a high end infrastructure, adding storage to it is pretty inexpensive, especially if the more storage you add, the more you get paid.
However, adding more locations is expensive, which is why we're trying to incentivize the idea of adding more locations as well, because the more locations that people bring into this, the healthier dStore is and the better we all perform.
Sure, it's expensive if you're not already there, but we're trying to get people who are already in some of these things. Did you have a third? I can't remember your third question.
I got it.
Did you get it?
Yeah, no, I got it. So your third question about speed and availability.
Right.
One of the bigger problems that has been brought up is how do we make this thing fast, and better yet, how do we make this thing respond fast? So if an edge node does not have a file and it needs to pull it from the network, then it's only going to be as fast as it's uplinked to that network or the seeds that are available in that network. Which boils down to, if you have like a gigabyte file that you're waiting for a gigabyte file to come in, it's not going to start sending you that file till it has that file. So that causes an issue where you're waiting for it to pull down before it can be sent to you, and that creates timeouts and all sorts of things. They're just frankly not usable. So we decided to actually go about this in a different way and say.
So what you're describing is vanilla IPFS. Right?
Yes, well, IPFS in general, just large block size, large continuous blocks of data are not easily feasible to move around the internet when we don't have the bandwidth to do it instantly. So the idea that we need to do is to shard it, just like we do with any other database or any other major piece of large data. So the idea is that if you have a gigabyte file, or if you have a movie that is large in length, to be able to shard it into pieces and to be able to use something like HLS and say, okay, now a file can't be anything more than 10 meg in size for any one single block, but you can chain as many of those things together to be able to create and recreate and rebuild any kind of file you have. This way, even if you're asking for a file that is a gigabyte file, you're asking for it in 10 meg requests, so you're only waiting for a node to fulfill. And by being able to multiplex it like that, we can actually multiplex the requests across the edges, so you're not actually even having to request from a single server anymore.
Yeah, and that's probably more than we should have said, but that's an innovation that Stephanie came up with. This is why, but I honestly, anyone who has seen the demo can figure out that we must be, and who knows enough about this would be able to figure out that this must be what we're doing, because the big picture is, if you have a terabyte file, it's got to it's got to first go to the node you're going to, if it's not already there, and then start going to you. But that's going to take a lot longer. That's not going to be functional. That's a third reason why IPFS is slow in finding files, especially large files. So what Stephanie decided to do is segment that into a bunch of blocks of the same size. Then as each one of those comes in, then that can start getting served, and so it gets rid of that big lag at the beginning. And I'm certain we shouldn't have said this, but it is exciting, and that's why we're able to, like, for those of you who have seen the demo, and we're streaming, HD video, right? And it starts right, not only is it able to stream, but it starts right away, right? It doesn't download the whole thing and then start. So that will, like, for your call recording thing, which we're so excited is the first announced project on dStore, and I think I couldn't hope for a better one, right? Because we've worked great with you in the past, and the present. You're deeply involved in this whole project with us, so we're thrilled that Vault is going to be on dStore, and we can talk about that. Those files, these big encrypted files, they're going to come very fast because of the way it's designed. Now, if your files for HIPAA law or whatever are encrypted, one thing is you're not going to be able, you can't decrypt a big encrypted
Right.
file is sharded. You're not going to be able to decrypt it until you have the whole thing. That's not dStore. That's file encryption. But you'll start getting it, and for unencrypted files that won't be a problem. You could stream them as you need, but that's just a reality. Unless you know something I don't.
No, that's pretty spot on. Like, that's the one edge case where sharding files doesn't really work is something like that, or a container format like AVI, where you have to wait for the end before you can play the beginning.
Right.
Like,
that's just a computer technology. Yeah.
It's sometimes the technology of, in different layers doesn't really work for this.
Yeah. This doesn't make dogs fly. It just makes stuff happen.
No, it's great, guys. It's great. I really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to working with you to get this stuff going. So thank you.
Hey, congratulations, Marlon. I think what you're doing is so amazing. I was blown away yesterday when I saw not only you were announcing it. It was a surprise announcement. This is a week, Telos birthday week. We've got a lot of really cool announcements. I knew you and I had talked about that. I had no idea you were going to announce it, let alone that you were going to have, a Twitter tech guru with 500,000 followers announce it. So, good job. Congratulations.
Yeah, we came a very long way in the past 12 months, huh?
I'm going to load up on some of that QBE coin that's sitting around the.
Well, thank you guys
awesome.
for answering those questions. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Marlon.
Thanks, Marlon. Cheers.
Cheers, bud.
Cool. So we got a bunch of different questions that have come through. Here's one from Kirsten. Will you be able to access file without having a specific app software by deep link to it?
Yes.
Douglas mentioned a use case for a certificate in a supply chain in an earlier video. People want to access but have no idea about Telos or dStore.
Yeah, so I'll take this one. So if you think about, this is dStore. Let's think about dStore like Amazon Web Services S3, right? It's very similar. It's a decentralized. It's in many ways very easy to think of it like a decentralized version of that. Most individuals don't use S3 directly. Everyone on the internet uses it. They don't necessarily know they use it, right? Like, for example, I believe Netflix is on S3, right? Yeah, so if you're using Netflix, you're using S3. You're not necessarily using S3, that you don't have an S3 account. You're just signing into Netflix, right? So this underlying cloud store, while super exciting, cloud storage is also super boring. Like this, it's really boring. It's the thing that's under the app that you're going to be using. Frankly, Telos is also like the thing that's supporting, I actually think that way more people, like 2 years from now, people are going to be using seeds all the time, and 3/4 of them are not even going to realize that it runs on Telos, or they're going to go, yeah, I heard about that, but they aren't going to, most end users are not going to interact with Telos directly, even though they're interacting with it all the time, right? That's the future, right? Where we want a future where people aren't thinking about, oh, I'm using blockchain today. They're just doing their shit on the internet, right? dStore is very similar, right? we, just like you're not going, hey, I signed in my S3 account and got my files. No, you signed into Dropbox or whatever. Most people, the vast majority, are going to be interacting with dStore every day without really knowing it, because they're doing it through a number of different apps, right? And especially dApps, right? And now, it's also going to be possible, especially after we get out of beta, anyone can create an account and do it directly through their Telos account. That will be possible, but I think that'll be about as common as people getting their own Amazon AWS S3 account. Most people aren't going to do that. They'll use it through one of a multitude of interfaces of dApps that are built on top of it. It's a foundational technology. It doesn't, most people don't, address themselves, go in and directly use TCP/IP to go to a website, even though they could. To make these things consumer technologies, you build layers on top of it. Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah.
close?
That's a really good answer. Next question. Kirsten again. I would also like some. Yeah. I would also like some indication on cost per gigabyte, terabyte. Will there be a native token for payment, or just using Telos?
So let me take that as well. It's premature to talk about what the exact pricing will be. It will be less than traditional cloud. Yeah, it'll be less. Now, it could be potentially be a lot less, but we want to make sure that we're paying. We want to make it less. We make it significantly less, but we also want to make sure that we are supporting a really healthy ecosystem of storage providers, right? And also we will have investors, who are helping us roll this out much faster than we would if it was solely GoodBlock. So we want to this is to make money. So we don't know. We can't say exactly what the price will be. That's to be determined, but it'll be less expensive, and it won't be a penny less. It'll be a meaningful amount less. But there will be profit built into the system for all the participants, because that's how you build a healthy system. Second part of that question is there going to be some special coin like Messiah coin or storage or anything like that? No, there will not be. It's going to use Telos, which I'm sure to some people is a special token, but it's completely separate, right? And also Telos already has both banker smart contracts and fiat on-ramps and things like that, and will very soon have USD and it has other national currency stable coins, and we'll have USD one soon. So what you'll be able to do mostly is pay for it any way you want. Now again, the people paying for it are actually going to be the vast majority of these dApps. So these dApps that are going to come out, and if Vault, right, for example, is going to come out, and it's going to be built on Telos, and it's going to be built on dStore, and they're going to pay. They're going to have an account that's pre-funded so that there's no chance of running out, right? And they can and their monthly or whatever periodic costs are going to be pulled out of that, right, out of that fund, and they're going to keep that going. That's all going to be paid in Telos. I'm sure from Marlin. Other companies could fund their account in just in USD or South African Rand or whatever, using stable coins, and fiat on ramps, and then that'll just be automatically turned into Telos through the Bancor contract. So it can be absolutely invisible to users, but mainly what's going to be is it's going to be the dApps that are paying, and then the users are mostly going to pay to dApps. So this decentralized, if you've got a decentralized dStore based Dropbox type service, right, they're going to pay dStore Telos however they get it, whether it's Telos or whatever, but their customers are going to pay them however they want to be paid in USD or whatever, right? So again, because mostly the technologies that people interact with are going to be interacting with dStore through an intermediary service provider and app or dApp, they're going to pay them that way, and that and the DApp itself is just going to pay Telos. It's going to pay Telos to dStore. But we didn't think, I personally think there's a lot of projects that create coins that don't absolutely need them. I didn't want to replicate that. It's not necessary. We have a great form of payment in Telos. And so we just decided to leverage that. It was actually another one of the great things that we have, available to us. By the way, important note, Stephanie always reminds me, is you're not going to need any special new equipment. Actually, just like S3, you don't need to get special new kinds of routers or whatever to use them. Same thing with dStore. So the dApps that work with us and the enterprises that work with us and everybody works with us, it'll be a very familiar payment model to how they pay for S3. It'll be less. We can't say at this moment exactly how much less, but it'll be less, and it will be using the system that they understand. Although ultimately it's going to go through Telos, TLOS coin at some point. So that actually builds the Telos infrastructure. Also during that period, that 1 year or whatever period the beta time, the 3 phases of the beta are, during that period, we intend to really only work with dApps that are actually building on Telos, because already we're seeing a flood of interest in dApps that want to build on this technology, and we only have so many that we can do. So like we have three phases currently envisioned in our beta program, and it's very small, and it gets bigger with each one. So we can solve the most common problems, and then find more edge problems, and then kind of deal with sort of everyone for a while. But we need to narrow our focus, and so for that reason, we're going to be working with people who are deploying on Telos already, either already on Telos or coming to Telos for dStore, because there's a lot of interest, and we can't do a great job of servicing everybody. Since it's on Telos and we have a lot of connections in Telos, it's just going to be a lot easier to narrow the providers that we're helping get onto the technology to those that are also on Telos.
That's a great answer. So we have a question about, this is from EOS Phoenix Smith. Can we expect to see an abstracted UX for non-crypto users? So you sort of touched on this before, but are you guys, building just like a simple Dropbox or something as a demonstration? Or I know like there might be a company like that. Who knows? What can you talk about? When can we see the first user interface or use of dStore? Do you have any roadmap for that?
Yeah, we can't talk about that because that's other people's information to talk about. We could talk about what Marlon mentioned, because he announced that, and he announced that. That's his that's his decision, whether he, when it's right time for each of the people that we're working with to come out with their own announcement. That's not for us to make. We're not trying to score points on other people's projects. I mean, I think hopefully people who've been watching Telos and watching GoodBlock and things like that understand that I personally, and we as a company are very averse to hyping stuff. It's to a fault, right? It's a problem with Telos that we don't hype stuff as much as we should. But I really don't like hyping stuff. I really don't like talking about other people's things. But when what you're doing is hype, you have to hype it. When what you're doing is real, you don't have to hype it, because people will come to it. And so this is something that's real that people are going to come and use. So I just don't feel the need to go, hey, look, bang the drum, because it works, and it's going to be still all alone in the field, I believe. And so people are going to be using it. So I don't, along with my hesitancy to say, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, I just don't feel the need, and it's other people's news. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't share much. I would say, keep in touch. This is just the very beginning of when we're even talking about this, and that happens for a few reasons. Number one, my own personal reticence. There are other people would have this project and would and would have been talking about it forever. Other people would have gone out and raised, $20 million on the idea of doing this. We are not that way. I'm not that way. And maybe that's a better way, frankly, I don't know. But I have a problem doing that. So this is something that exists and is done, and we've solved it. And now we're going through that. I wouldn't, when people are going to commit their service to this, they need a lot of belief and faith. They need that it's actually going to work, that it's going to solve all these problems, right? So I certainly don't blame anybody or want to encourage people to say that faster, because until they feel comfortable doing it. And we barely scratched the surface. This is the first announcement because I don't like hyping stuff that I don't know I can 100% deliver. So we kind of waited for that. There's legal ramifications. This is technology that Stephanie invented, that GoodBlock supported the invention of, and so we need to protect that using patent protections. And so we had to wait for that process, and that process continues to advance. There's a lot of reasons that I mean, we don't have somebody said, hey, what's your dStore Twitter or Telegram? Like, have one. We're gonna put out a couple of videos from time to time. I'm excited we're doing this. We're gonna put these things out, but we're mostly gonna be working with a small number of people, and as they feel comfortable, those will be announced. We're here. We can only handle so much. So I don't even want thousands and thousands of people, approaching us, because it's just gonna. We have the interest that we need right now to be able to roll this out and expand it. I'm certainly interested in hearing from more people, especially if you're watching this. You're probably an ideal person for us to be working with, because you're already sort of in this. You're getting it. You watched an hour of this, whatever. That's great. I don't want to say we don't want to look for more people, but we have a lot of interest. We probably have more interest than we can initially fulfill, which is a great place to be. It's unfortunate we have to probably turn some people down. So we're going to be looking for the very best use cases, the people who we have the best working relationships with, so that we can roll this out really well and do a good job. But I'm not looking to hype this. dStore is real. It's coming.
A bit of a clarification there, but that was good to actually cover that. We don't hype much at all, yeah. But the technology is real. But he's referring to the use of private keys and blockchain technology. Will you in the short term, will you make this available for maybe a company that might be centralized, but or has a centralized login system, but uses the Telos dStore technology? That might be something you guys are open to, or
it's decentralized storage, right? So in the end, decentralized storage, just like we can't say, just like we simply can't and wouldn't say who can and can't use Telos, because it's a truly decentralized public blockchain. On the end user or dApp side, we can't say who will use dStore, right? It's decentralized, and when it's fully available, it's and released. We're not gonna if somebody could say no, you can't use it, then that makes a lie of the decentralized part, right? There's no one's going to say no, you can't use it. And during the beta phase, we can put a few more controls on that, but anyone can use it. So I think there will certainly be centralized companies who just use it because it's cheaper, it's just as fast or faster. It can get around certain firewalls that they want to be able to get around that they can't currently, or they feel that offering this to their customers is something their customers like. There's a lot of reasons to use dStore over traditional cloud storage that don't have to do with decentralization, actually, as an ethos, right? So yeah, anyone can use it, and probably people will use it just because it's cheaper.
No, that's a good answer. There was a response from Katie saying, where was it? When Nobel Prize for Stephanie. I can agree with that comment. I think, yeah.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I think it'd be a little while. I think it'd be like, it takes a while. Next year we'll roll it out, and then I think it takes a while for people to kind of get it. So maybe 5 years after that, and then the Nobel Committee, they probably have, it depends. It depends if it's one of those years, if it's a slow year for major advances. You might have
when they realize the impact, I think
within the decade, certainly within the decade.
I certainly hope that there are some like Nobel Prizes given, for crypto in the future, because I really see the global financial system actually finally opening up. We see so many work proposals from, places like Africa, where typically there was like very little access to the financial system, to have like a bank account and actually be able to invoice people in the US or Australia or wherever. Suddenly just everything is open, and it's because of decentralized technology. So it's really quite brilliant, and who knows what kind of opportunities will be opened by technology like dStore. It's
stuff we don't expect.
You don't even know yet. Yeah.
It's the biggest, like before we were talking about this when we talked about D-realms and our approach towards decentralized gaming, but it applies to anything, right? Before YouTube came out, nobody knew that there was going to be unboxing videos. If you told somebody that they would sit around and watch an unboxing video, they think you were crazy. But people, and there's like 100 kinds of like genres of video that no one would have believed would ever exist. They would laugh at you, and yet people do it all the time, and so it's the same thing with any revolutionary technology, like what dStore, like what D-realms will do for gaming assets and decentralized gaming, and in an even bigger way, what dStore is going to do for anything that needs storage. The real uses, the real things that are going to be surprises that we are not currently able to envision, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. No, exactly. I've got a really good question here from Blaze Bio. Have you built connectors to make migration from centralized services like AWS to dStore seamless? Are there plans to ease the migration overhead for companies already locked in to AWS, among others?
I think we'd love to do that. I think that's a little bit, I think well,
I can answer that.
Okay, I think that's more sophisticated than the stage we're at right now. But clearly Stephanie disagrees.
There'll be scripts to be able to handle this sort of stuff. Because I mean, whether you're coming from like Amazon's cold storage or S3 or Google stuff or Rackspace's stuff or Linode stuff or DigitalOcean or any other providers, Backblaze, there's always going to have to be something that gets it from one end to the next. And there's many different ways to do this. And you can look at any one number of ways that Amazon does offloading massive data sets to S3. And we will probably have something in place that does everything except for the physical location offloading. And we can always go there too. That's not anything that we can't do, but it's not something that is necessarily feasible when we start talking about most of these data sets already existing in a cloud. So a lot of what will happen when it comes to migration is virtual machines will be started, scripts will be set in place, variables will be filled out, migrations will start, a batch job will happen, and data will be migrated, and that'll be that. So yeah, I think that's
yeah, and absolutely, that's one of the reasons, right, that we are, as excited, like we think that this is a huge technology. We're like, I would love to just have it be, good blocks forever. But one of the things that happened, one of the reasons why we're going out and now starting to talk to investors about this is that kind of money means that we can hire people to do scripts from a dozen different existing storage things much faster, right? So we can bring in people. There's a lot of that supporting development, right? dStore, the core development, done. We have that. It's working. All these other pieces around it for nice looking interfaces and developer support for everyone who wants to build everything, and all these migration scripts and things like that. Those are the next frontiers for us. But yeah, we definitely will be doing all that. It's just that's what the long beta period essentially is for.
Just to be clear, though, the migration scripts can also be wrote by anybody within the community. It doesn't necessarily have to be us by any stretch of the imagination. And like, we can create the first one, to like create a boilerplate, and like we already intend on creating other boilerplates, especially for bringing web applications to dStore like Angular and React. But there's nothing to say that this can't be a community thing, and there's nothing to say this can't be expanded from a community thing, because in the end, if you can expose a storage endpoint within a file system, you can upload that to dStore. And whether you do that in the cloud, whether you do that on your own personal machines, whether you do that for your cell phone, is completely up to you.
Yeah, but clearly the future is that the migration scripts for dStore will be hosted on dStore.
Yeah.
Definitely. Just opening it up to anyone else who has questions.
Just for the UX question that was there about whether or not we'll have like an actual UI panel for developers and operators to work with that is outside and abstracted from this. Yeah, absolutely. It actually already exists.
We have
it's mostly completed, and it's
complete. It's just not as fancy as it's going to be, but we wouldn't be announced like that. Those are pieces that we wouldn't be announcing and talking about dStore if we didn't have those
right
consoles and things done.
Yeah. So the idea is that, just because these are advanced technologies and these are really fancy technologies, they're not completely replacements of all technologies. And one of the things that we, you need to be able to look at this is to have some kind of console management panel. And like I said, we already have that mostly in place, and it solves this riddle. So anybody that is a developer doesn't necessarily have to understand blockchain. It doesn't even really have to understand dStore. It just really has to understand an API. And that API has actually been mostly documented already. So it's not actually a hard read or complicated read to push things on or off of dStore.
Yeah, so to the point, so there will be a console. Most people, though, I expect most of these developers will actually be interacting with it almost exclusively through the API. Importantly, the API for dStore is different than the API for IPFS, because for a lot of really good reasons, but you wouldn't want people to try to come in from the IPFS API. But our own API is bespoke for dStore, and that's how most people will interact with it. There is also a nice shiny console that shows you all this information as well.
Yeah, it's something that I really wouldn't even think of, like the fact that, when you procure like one of these services, typically via AWS, you have to have a portal because you need to have somewhere that you put your credit card details in and you sign up for this. But, when you're procuring service on the Telos network, you don't need that. All you need is an account that you can create for free and, stock with some tokens that you could convert from anywhere.
You can sign into the console with a Telos blockchain account sign-in, not necessarily a separate API key. You do both. There's API keys and you can also sign in from a Telos account. That's kind of cool if you think about it, right? And yeah, you don't need, so look, most people will not treat it this way and will interact with it through some other app, but people can interact with it directly. It'll be easy. The people who know enough now to use a blockchain Telos wallet and to use the smart contract interface of that, let's say, will be able to do stuff on dStore themselves, I think, right? And without any separate, purely from their Telos account. Once we build that API, there will be people who can use that, without, there's the whole point of decentralized storage is you don't need anybody's permission to do it. And so that's how it works.
No, definitely. I know you guys haven't finalized all the pricing things. But, was there any possibility of a staking mechanism versus a fee model, which sounds like it'll utilize a fee model where you pay per, gigabyte or terabyte. How do you imagine that might work anyway? Will you store the telos in a smart contract? So as, you utilize more and more bandwidth or storage, it pays out automatically, or do you need to manually manage that?
So yeah, so in terms of staking, that's something that you would have. That's something that makes sense if you have your own coin system, right? And that's staking, like Sia coin or something like that. That makes sense. We decided to forego that model because for all the reasons we previously mentioned. So staking, you also don't have staking. However, you can stake Telos. You can stake your Telos and then have. I'm certain that whether we make it or somebody else makes it, there'll be some kind of program where you can stake a bunch into Rex, and then it automatically calculates how much you need to put into your entrustment so that it's there for your draw. So you can because there will be like an entrustment account like that, like it's basically a deposit which gets drawn down, right? That could be kept if you really want to keep on top of that, or if you want to have a computer doing a cron job or something that just feeds that. You don't have to have any in there until it's needed, right? A lot of people will just throw some in for I think that'll get super automated pretty easily. So if you want to stake, I would say stake in Telos Rex, which is about 20% APR right now. One wouldn't be that. And then have that flow into your entrustment account to cover your monthly. I think it's going to be pretty easy to predict what your prices are likely to be. Because you do pay for access, if something gets super hot, you will probably be paying more. But I think that, hopefully we'll have a way that people can, hopefully with our accounting system, there'll be a way that people can get a kind of a heads up on what.
There'll be a full notification. Like there'll be you will have an ability to set up an alarms and tripwires, for lack of better words. So if there's a situation where you do have a runaway file or something went viral, and you need to do something about it, you can do something about it. But on the same token, like the economics of this is so small that even if something does go viral, you're only talking about a couple of dollars difference, hopefully, in the amount of price or amount of funds you're paying to store something over the course of a month, which is still like Doug was saying earlier, we're not trying to nail a hard number down right here at the moment, but this was literally designed from the ground up to be competitive and be at a level that can compete with things like Amazon and Google. So yeah, like it will definitely be very, very competitive. And we think that by having the ability to remove a lot of the overhead and remove a lot of the things that drive the price up for Amazon and Google, that we'll be able to actually be able to pass those savings on to the people that use this. Because in the end, this is as good as the community is, and if we take care of our community, it will continue to grow faster.
And also to the provider, we will, those cost savings we will share between end user cost savings, but also we want to make sure that we support the ecosystem of node operators. So it's a winning operation for them as well. But we believe there's enough savings in there that we can do both.
Definitely. We've got a really good question from Sudeep, and sort of was covered a little bit earlier, but I'll ask it anyway. Considering what goes on blockchain stays on blockchain forever, how would dStore handle takedown notices, e.g. someone uploads a Hollywood movie or a Microsoft software?
So great question. So first off, one difference between blockchain and dStore, again, these are complementary technologies that are very important to each other, but they are not the same technology. So something that's on dStore is not on dStore forever, right? It's if you stop paying, it will eventually, it'll get unpinned and go away. We want to be really clear about that, right? Like we thought over the past year plus, we thought a lot about various economic models. And one of the problems that a lot of people have, had to address is you can, if you're going to be storing something forever, there's ongoing costs of storing that forever. Now, the cost of storing goes down, and hopefully the cost of providing infrastructure also goes down, but not as fast as the cost of actual physical storage does. And a lot of people have figured that they could store stuff forever for enough pay up front, but I actually don't think that's an economic model that works. With dStore, like with Amazon S3 or something like that, if you stop paying, your stuff goes away, and I don't think anyone should expect anything different than that. However, I don't know exactly how this will play out. I think that will be interesting. My intention is not for this to be a technology that is removing people's content. If it's removing people's content, without their knowledge and permission. So my guess is that a takedown notice would not come to dStore, but it come to whoever were the people who had actually uploaded it, and they would have that responsibility for making that determination.
The other one too is that the way that dStore works and the way that what role that we play in dStore, we don't actually store any of the data on the management nodes. All of the things that we control actually don't store the data in the same way that torrent trackers don't actually store the data. They just store the metadata. I want to be very clear about that if they did send us a takedown notice, we don't have the data. We're just the managers of the data. We're the traffic controllers at best.
Right. And also that role itself becomes decentralized. So we will not be, there will be a series of managers. The managers will probably be the most trusted of the service providers. It'll be a higher level, but it won't all just be, GoodBlock dStore. Again, we are removing the single point of failure, including ourselves. And people should be excited about that. But that also means that, our ethos is not to, once you start taking down stuff because somebody says to, then where does that end? Now, look, I was in the film and arts world for quite a while. I understand the needs of protecting the rights of right holders, but it won't be, it's a little bit like saying you're gonna send a takedown notice to Hitachi because something is stored on a Hitachi hard drive, or Sony, your thing is being pirated by Pirate Bay or whatever, but it's being stored on a Hitachi's hard drive. So you're going to send a takedown notice to them and say, hey, you got to get this off their hard drive. It's like, it's not, we just make it.
Yeah. The other one too is because we're segmenting the data, that there's not any one full piece. So that the full ISO isn't exactly in one spot, or the full movie isn't exactly in one spot. So we're not necessarily talking about, files and pieces all in one complete place in one place to say that that's a complete copy there or that's a complete copy there. These things are multiplexed and broken down and split up. So there's a 10 meg chunk on that group, and there's a 10 meg chunk on that group. There's a 10 meg chunk on that group. Is a 10 meg chunk of data, is it a movie at that point, or is it a random piece of data that means nothing by itself? And I know that this is a lot of really gray area type stuff, and it is kind of wishy-washy there, but I mean, there's these sort of things are going to, protect us in the long run, sort of situation. And it's also going to make it so, you can't just drop an ISO or something like that easily into this situation without having to pay for it and to build the multiplexing on it. And we abstract all of this higher with a Dropbox type of environment. But again, that's not on us anymore. Just in the same that what happens in Dropbox isn't on Amazon because it's stored on S3. It comes down to the actual app provider and how they manage and regulate, and it literally leaves them up to the control and how they want to deal with their own services.
Yeah, so we're going to be offering, the platform layer, and then there's going to be an application layer on top of that, whether that's a individual user or a Dropbox or whatever. And so if a Hollywood movie is stored on that, and we were sent a takedown notice, I would probably inform them that there's a more appropriate party to have that. It's an interesting question. That's how we
I think
intend to address
the censorship issue.
Well, it can as well.
Yeah, Michael makes a great point in that direction. Didn't they still take down the Pirate Bay because they were simply pointing to where to obtain copyrighted info? I think most laws tend to generalize being associated with finding, serving the content as creating / storing the content. So yeah, they go after the domain hosting the files, or not hosting them, but kind of pointing you in the direction. They go after the website essentially if someone was doing this.
Yeah. So again, let's not get too into the weeds on this. These are hypothetical questions, and there's a lot of points. Like I see that people say, well, for example, my servers have the content, so they come after me. But as Stephanie described, they're not going to actually, like, no one is going to have like a copy of that.
You've got bits of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of gray area there, and so that is probably so. And this is a new technology, right? And it's fundamentally different than current cloud services. The people who actually are behind this are not actually doing these things. It'll be interesting to see. Clearly, there will be questions about this, and we will have to address them in the future. I think that we've kind of said what we can say right now.
Yeah.
I don't have all those answers.
It'll evolve over time, won't it?
It'll evolve, yeah.
I think a good place to kind of end this would be what sort of requirements will there be for providers? Will they need to be a Telos block producer? Do they need to go through Telos BP compliance, or can they do they even need to run a Telos node?
No, I don't think so. I mean, our first group will. I think the first group that we're putting together and working with will, just because that's a very convenient group for us to work with. We've good relationships. I don't think there's any requirement at all for that.
There is no requirement. We actually we wanted to we for the beta program and the alpha, we are reaching out to the block producers specifically because we know that they have infrastructure in place to be able to handle the initial setup, initial rollout, and also having network operators and system administrators can handle some of the more technical aspects when we need to do debugging.
And we already went through part of that in building what we abandoned with the Telos IPFS version. We already went through an onboarding process with a lot of people and working closely. So we kind of know what that process looks like, and we have all those partners, pretty much. I mean, many of them standing by, and many of at various levels. So that's very convenient for us, but there's no requirement.
Yeah, no, this is more going to come down to what kind of resources, what kind of quality, what is the quality of resources you can provide? Because I mean, if you have 10 terabyte of space or 100 terabyte of space, but you're still pushing over a 56K modem, that's useless to us. Or if you're behind a 300 millisecond ping time because you decided to push this over a satellite, and a bunch of other stuff, that's not going to be useful for us either. Likewise, if you only have like a couple hundred meg, that's not going to really be useful for us either for the amount of infrastructure that has to go in place to be able to build this. So there will be minimum requirements. The burden of entry is going to be as low as we can possibly make it and still be able to maintain a quality of service. And currently, as it's standing, it's looking at roughly 10 meg of space. 1 terabyte space, 10 meg internet connection minimum in either direction, and IPv6 native connectivity to some degree for operators to interconnect. Even if you are going to be one of the group that is providing IPv4 edge endpoint access, you still have to have IPv6 to interconnect with the rest of the swarm. That is a hard requirement now.
Yeah, and if you're, but I mean, in today's world, if you're not able to provide that, then this is not the service for you to to do, right?
Right.
I mean, and there's no shortage. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're working with block producers. Pretty much, you know, they're all able to provide that, and so it's for them. It's just how do we add a you know, a few terabytes of, you know, enough space. By the way, we have some people who have such huge systems. It's, you know, they're like looking to this. They want this because it's a way to actually utilize the massive systems that they have in place, right? It's actually, if you're paying so a lot of times to get like really good internet access and whatnot, you need to pay sort of a high premium for, you know, for get a couple racks in a data center, or maybe a second data center as a failover and things like that. So people are paying a lot. And since the EOS IO dream hasn't really fully been fulfilled for block producers yet, and making what they will be making someday, there's a lot of people looking for ways to wring, you know, more money out of their systems. And so we think there's, you know, we know that there's going to be a lot of interest, and we expect there's other projects that are doing DPoS stuff that may not be related to Telos at all, that have, you know, that have their own ecosystem of providers who would also, you know, be very interested in coming here. I don't think we'll have any problem. And while we say there are minimums, there may not actually end up being minimums, but there will be functional minimums, because if you don't have a certain level of service, you're just not going to get any requests, and then you're not going to be paid. So you're not making anything back. It's going to constantly actually push the level of service higher and higher through the competition, right? That's how the incentives are aligned, and that's how they should have, and they should be. And like that economic model, that's a unique economic model for these types of projects, and probably one of the reasons why others haven't been able to achieve what we think we're achieving. Because they've all used a very different, mostly classic blockchain type staking model, which doesn't drive providers towards providing better infrastructure.
Definitely. I should really be wrapping up, but
yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
I think we've said a lot of stuff that we.
I could ask questions all day, to be honest. Like, it's super interesting technology. It's incredibly.
You may have to redact some of this thing. You might have to put, you know, like a little bar over my mouth.
Definitely.
Redacted.
Definitely. But yeah, it's been great having you guys on. I'm super excited to see where this goes. Just finally, if someone wants to build a dApp using dStore and Telos, you know, how can they get in touch with you guys?
Reach out to me or
yeah, reach out to us. If you can't, I mean, if you can't find us, you're probably not an ideal early adopter, right? I mean, I hate to say it. If you're, I mean, we have so few slots. We're excited. Yeah. We're totally, I mean, it's like, we're totally excited. And when we get to phase 3 of the beta, we're going to be accepting a lot more. Right now it's hard. I don't want to tell anybody not to contact us, but you know, if you need us, you can find us. You can find it. Go to Telos, ask where we are, you know, you'll find us. If you can't do that, then it's not gonna. Then something's not gonna work. Yeah.
It's a good problem to have. I understand. You don't.
Yeah,
want to open up the floodgates too much.
We don't have. There's a lot of stuff we're not wanting to show publicly yet. We will, but that's just not like the general public is not actually our audience at this time. It's you know, those providers like those developers like Marlon who have a real need ready to go. Ideally, who have a good understanding of kind of what we're about and maybe even have worked with us. Those are people that we're going to be working with in phase 1 of the beta. Phase 2 will probably expand it, but again, you're probably 1 degree of separation from, you know, me or Stephanie or you or whatever. Beyond that, we'll you know, expand that out. But just get in touch, jump into Telos, ask where Douglas or Stephanie are, and you'll get in touch with us, and we'll talk. we're very careful about who we're onboarding and what the onboarding process is. And also we think, by the way, that having that early access, there's a lot of value there. And so we're also interested in, working with people who understand that the early access into the system has value, and the time that we're putting into helping them build their technology, has some value, and we'd like to figure out ways for everybody to sort of capture that.
Definitely. Oh, that's awesome. I think we should end it there. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks everybody for just so much interest in our little project.
Cheers, Stephanie. Cheers, Doug.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.
Ciao.